A man is never truly afraid of a woman who reacts out of emotion, who pleads for attention, or who constantly seeks his validation. What shakes him to his core is the woman who can stay composed when he expects her to crumble. She doesn't chase, she doesn't explain, she doesn't beg for understanding, she simply allows silence to be her language. That silence, that stillness, that emotional restraint, it communicates something words never could. It tells him she's not driven by impulse, she's driven by self-awareness. When he withdraws, she doesn't panic. When he tests her patience, she doesn't lose her grounding. She has trained herself to control what most people can't, their emotions. And that control is what shifts the entire dynamic between them. Emotional self-control is not about pretending not to care. It's about knowing that caring too fast, too soon, or too openly with the wrong energy is what depletes power. The woman who never chases understands that emotions are energy, and energy, once given freely, becomes currency in any connection. She knows when to invest it and when to withdraw it. She understands that chasing is not love. It's fear disguised as desire. It's the fear of being forgotten, of being left behind, of not being enough. And once she transcends that fear, she becomes something far more powerful than desirable. She becomes unforgettable. Her calmness leaves a man wondering what's going on inside her, what she's thinking, what she's feeling, and that mystery is intoxicating. Most people chase because they want control, they want certainty, they want reassurance. But the woman who never chases already has control because she's certain within herself. She doesn't need closure to move on. She doesn't need validation to feel beautiful. And she doesn't need reciprocation to keep her self-worth intact. That emotional security radiates through everything she does, in her tone, in her posture, in her choices. And when a man senses that she's not reacting to his absence, that she's not trying to fill the space he left, it unsettles him. It creates an emotional imbalance that forces him to rethink his actions. Because for the first time, he realizes she's not playing by the same rules as everyone else. He starts questioning himself. Not because she said anything, but because she didn't. Her restraint becomes a mirror reflecting his uncertainty. He begins to feel the weight of her silence, the meaning behind her lack of reaction. He wonders if he misjudged her value, if he took her calm for indifference, or her quiet for weakness. That's when the fear sets in, the fear that he might have lost something he can't easily replace. The woman who never chases holds the kind of power that doesn't come from dominance or manipulation, it comes from emotional maturity. She's aware of her feelings, but she doesn't let them dictate her actions. She moves from understanding, not from insecurity. She knows that chasing may win temporary attention, but stillness earns lasting respect. The woman who never chases understands that her worth isn't something to be proven, it's something to be recognized. She knows that her presence alone carries value, and that value doesn't need to be constantly displayed or explained. She has learned the universal law that when you know what you bring to the table, you don't run after those who can't see it. Her energy is not desperate, it's deliberate. She invests it only where it's reciprocated because she understands that chasing creates imbalance. The moment you chase, you place someone else on a pedestal and unknowingly lower yourself in the process. But when you stand still in your value, the balance of power shifts naturally. He begins to lean in, not because she demands it, but because her quiet assurance reminds him of something rare, self-respect in motion. This kind of woman doesn't use her worth as a weapon. She uses it as guidance. She knows that being valuable isn't about perfection or pride. It's about presence, grace, and emotional intelligence. She doesn't play games or use manipulation to gain attention. Instead, she carries herself in a way that makes a man realize that her attention is something to be earned. She never lowers her standards just to keep someone close. She would rather walk alone in truth than stay attached through fear. That kind of energy creates magnetism, not the loud attention-seeking kind, but the quiet, powerful kind that makes others take notice without her having to do anything at all. The woman who never chases lives by the law of value. Whatever is valuable attracts pursuit. You don't see diamonds running after people to prove they shine. They simply exist in their brilliance, and those who recognize their worth move mountains to possess them. This same energy applies to her. She knows that if she has to chase it, it was never meant to be kept. She trusts that what aligns with her value will come to her naturally, without force. Her calm confidence becomes her shield, her patience becomes her magnet. She doesn't hurry love, she allows love to meet her where she stands. For a man, this energy is both alluring and intimidating. He senses that he can't buy her affection with charm or attention because her standards are not emotional reactions, they are internal truths. She doesn't get attached to potential, she recognizes consistency. She doesn't fall for words, she responds to energy. The more she stands in her self-worth, the more his curiosity grows. He begins to realize that she doesn't need him, and that realization shifts everything. It makes him want to be better, to rise to her level, to meet the standard she silently sets just by being who she is. Her worth doesn't scream, it whispers, but that whisper echoes louder in his mind than the shouts of anyone who chases him. When a woman stops chasing, something powerful happens in the mind of a man. He feels the shift instantly, even if he can't articulate it. It's not anger or indifference that unnerves him. It's the sudden loss of control. For so long, he's been used to having emotional assurance. He's used to being desired, to being pursued, to feeling like he has the upper hand. But when she stops reaching out, when her energy pulls back and her attention no longer revolves around him, a quiet panic starts to build within him. He doesn't fear her absence because of loneliness. He fears it because it exposes his dependence on her validation. Her stillness reminds him that she was never beneath him. She was allowing him to lead. And once that permission is revoked, his sense of dominance begins to crumble. A man who has always felt comfortable being desired suddenly realizes he has lost the emotional control he once held. It's not about ego anymore, it's about power. When she was chasing, he knew his place. He could measure his worth by her reactions, by how much she cared, by how quickly she reached out. But now, with her detachment, he faces uncertainty. Her silence becomes a mirror, reflecting his own emotional instability. Every unanswered message, every moment of distance, chips away at the illusion that he was the one in control. And what frightens him most is the realization that she's no longer emotionally dependent on his presence. She has learned to stand on her own, and that self-sufficiency threatens his sense of importance. He begins to question himself in ways he never did before. He wonders if she's seeing someone else, if she's moved on, or worse, if she simply doesn't care anymore. The thought that she might be perfectly fine without him stirs a discomfort that goes beyond jealousy. It's a challenge to his ego, to his masculine identity, because a woman who doesn't chase is a woman who can't be manipulated through emotional scarcity. He can't lure her back with mixed signals, can't bait her with silence, can't provoke her with distance. She doesn't respond to tactics, she responds to truth. And that truth is unsettling. The woman who stops chasing unknowingly flips the dynamic. She no longer dances to his rhythm, she moves to her own. Her energy no longer reacts to his inconsistency, it flows independently. And the more she holds that energy, the more he feels drawn toward it. His fear isn't about rejection, it's about irrelevance. He fears being forgotten by someone who once cared deeply. He fears becoming invisible in the eyes of a woman who once saw him as significant. That realization cuts deep because it exposes the fragile nature of his confidence. She has taken nothing from him. She simply withdrew what was freely given. And that withdrawal exposes just how much power she had all along. It wasn't in what she said or did, it was in the emotion she chose to stop giving. Confidence is the kind of energy that doesn't have to be announced, it's simply felt. The woman who never chases carries herself with a quiet strength that makes people pause without her needing to demand attention. Her presence speaks for her. She doesn't try to impress, she doesn't over-explain, and she doesn't compete for validation. Her confidence is rooted in the deep, knowing that her worth isn't tied to anyone's approval. It's something internal, something unshakable, something that was built through experience, self-awareness, and resilience. When a man meets this kind of woman, he can sense immediately that she's different. There's no desperation in her energy, no attempt to fill silence with meaningless words. She's comfortable with herself, and that comfort becomes magnetic. It makes him feel both curious and challenged because she doesn't seek his validation. She naturally earns his respect. Her confidence changes the emotional dynamic between them. Most relationships are built on a subtle imbalance, where one person seeks reassurance while the other provides it. But she doesn't participate in that game. She doesn't need to be chosen to feel complete. She already feels whole. And that sense of wholeness creates a gravitational pull he can't ignore. When he tries to play distant, she doesn't chase. When he tests her boundaries, she doesn't bend. When he disappears, she doesn't panic. She simply redirects her focus. That stability shakes him because it shows that her emotions are not at the mercy of his actions. She's grounded, and grounding energy always dominates uncertainty. Her confidence also speaks through her choices. She doesn't chase attention. She attracts connection. She doesn't say yes out of fear of losing someone. She says yes only when it aligns with her peace. Every decision she makes radiates self-respect. And that kind of energy teaches him something profound. That a woman's power doesn't come from her beauty or her words, but from her ability to stay true to herself. It forces him to reflect on his own emotional inconsistencies, to see where he hides behind charm or ego, because her presence doesn't reward pretense. It rewards authenticity. When he realizes he can't impress her with the usual tricks, he feels compelled to show up differently, more genuine, more intentional, more vulnerable. The woman who never chases doesn't announce that she's confident. She embodies it in the way she carries herself through uncertainty. Her calm becomes contagious, her energy becomes steady, and her silence becomes powerful. She doesn't fear being alone because she understands that solitude isn't emptiness, it's alignment. That understanding gives her an aura of independence that both intimidates and fascinates him. He's drawn to her, yet slightly afraid of her, not because she's unkind, but because she's unpredictable in a world where most people are easy to read. Her confidence makes her the standard. She doesn't follow trends of emotional neediness. She sets the tone of emotional maturity. And once a man experiences that kind of stability, he realizes it's not her beauty that captivates him. It's her unwavering sense of self. Detachment is one of the most misunderstood forms of power, yet it is the most transformative. The woman who never chases understands that detachment doesn't mean she doesn't care. It means she refuses to lose herself in the process of caring. She has learned that attachment built on fear, anxiety, or control will always drain her energy. So she chooses something higher emotional alignment. Her detachment is not cold or distant, it's peaceful. It's the calm that comes from trusting that what's meant for her will never require her to chase. She no longer operates from scarcity because she's discovered abundance within herself. When she pulls her energy back, she's not punishing anyone, she's protecting her peace. She knows that giving endlessly to someone who doesn't value it isn't love, it's self-abandonment. So she detaches, not from people, but from expectations that limit her growth. This kind of detachment is magnetic because it's rooted in self-trust. She trusts that her presence is enough, that her effort is seen, and that whatever she loses by being true to herself was never meant to stay. A man feels that trust instantly. He senses that she's not chasing out of fear, not clinging out of insecurity, and not reacting to manipulation. That terrifies him because most men find control through emotional dependency. But when she detaches, He loses his ability to control the rhythm of her emotions. She no longer responds to his inconsistency, his silence, or his withdrawal. Her energy remains steady, unbothered, centered, grounded. That kind of emotional independence forces him to confront himself, to realize that her peace doesn't depend on his presence. Her detachment is power in its purest form because it removes all emotional leverage from the connection. She doesn't guilt, she doesn't plead, she doesn't demand clarity. She lets people show her who they are and acts accordingly. That quiet discipline disarms anyone who tries to play with her emotions. It creates a boundary that can't be crossed because it's not spoken, it's felt. Her energy says, "I will not fight for what's not choosing me." That statement alone creates a shift. A man who once felt confident in her pursuit suddenly starts to chase the calm he once took for granted. Her silence begins to echo louder than any argument could. Her absence begins to weigh heavier than any presence that begged to stay. The woman who practices detachment operates from a higher emotional frequency. She doesn't chase closure, she creates it within. She doesn't react to rejection, she redirects it toward her evolution. She has learned that love is not meant to drain her, it's meant to expand her. And so she allows things to flow. If it stays, it belongs. If it leaves, it taught her. Her peace becomes her priority, her growth becomes her compass, and her energy becomes sacred. This is why detachment doesn't make her cold, it makes her radiant. Because true detachment isn't about not feeling, it's about feeling everything deeply, but refusing to let those feelings control her path. When a woman stops chasing, she steps into a new level of awareness, one that awakens her true feminine power. This power isn't about control or dominance, it's about alignment, balance, and knowing who she is at her core. She no longer seeks to prove her worth through how much she gives or how much she tolerates. Instead, she begins to embody the kind of calm strength that doesn't compete or compare. Her energy shifts from chasing to attracting, from pleasing to deciding, from waiting to choosing. She understands that she is not an option in anyone's story, she is the author of her own. And in that realization, she becomes something far more magnetic than any words or gestures could create. She becomes whole. The rise of her true feminine power comes when she realizes that softness and strength are not opposites. They coexist beautifully within her. She can be nurturing without being naive, loving without losing boundaries, patient without becoming passive. She no longer measures love by how much she gives, but by how much peace it brings. That self-awareness changes everything. A man who encounters a woman like this doesn't just see her beauty, he feels her energy. The quiet confidence, the graceful detachment, the emotional intelligence that refuses to be shaken. She's not playing the role of the chaser anymore because she understands that anything that requires her to chase is not aligned with her truth. When she rises into her authentic feminine energy, she stops operating from lack. She no longer believes she must earn love. She knows she deserves it. She stops seeking validation from masculine approval and starts drawing strength from her own self-respect. This transformation unsettles many men because it removes their sense of control. They can't predict her, can't manipulate her emotions, can't win her affection through temporary effort. Her presence alone becomes a standard. She doesn't ask for more, she simply embodies more. She doesn't demand commitment, her energy requires it. And that's where the fear lies. A man feels that to be with her, he must evolve. He must rise from ego to authenticity, from surface attraction to emotional depth. Her power is not loud or forceful, it's quiet but undeniable. It's the kind of power that brings peace into chaos and confidence into uncertainty. When she walks away from what doesn't serve her, she's not running from love, she's protecting the sacredness of her energy. Her boundaries become an expression of self-love, not defense. Her silence becomes wisdom, her independence becomes beauty. and that presence makes him question everything he thought he understood about connection. She no longer lives in a world where attention equals affection. She lives in a world where energy equals alignment. The woman who never chases stands in her divine essence, calm, radiant, complete, and that level of wholeness is what he fears most because it reveals his own incompleteness in her light.